Welcome to the New York City Ballet's digital fall season. I'm Adrian Danchig-Waring, principal dancer and director of the New York Choreographic Institute. Tonight we'll see a world premiere by Pam Tanowitz and Russell Janzen, set to a score by Alfred Schnittke titled Klingende Buchstaben for solo cello. I'm thrilled to be able to witness this premiere with you this evening and to join you on the other side for a conversation with Pam and Russell. Now we'll see this original work in a film directed by Ezra Hurwitz on 5 sites around the Lincoln Center campus. I hope you enjoy, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Welcome back. I'm Adrian Danchig-Waring, and I'm now joined by Pam Tanowitz and Russell Janzen, whose work we all just saw. Pam, Russell, welcome. Pam, your work is so often about place, about context, about bringing the environment into the piece. And I'm hoping you can speak a bit to that in general in your practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. And thank you for noticing. And also, it's about the people. So it's about the environment and the people in the room that I'm working with. And that had to change because I wasn't in a room. I wasn't in a studio. And Russell and I started working on Zoom. So there's what I've been working on before the pandemic and what happened with this process. I mean, I think it's interesting that Russell and I actually started working before the call to make this piece, you know? So we, my last rehearsal before everything shut down was here at New York City Ballet for my new piece that didn't happen. So Russell and I decided to keep working together.
Yeah, but part of it was that Pam asked if I wanted to write something about the process of working with her. The building of the movement and the choreography that you saw was like also part of this like writing process too. It was like we were having a lot of conversations and figuring out how to make dance during this time, and then that resulted in this solo that was then reimagined for this filming process.
Yeah. What I love about this project is that we weren't worried about the product. We were only in process. Like I said before, there was no end. It was like this ongoing process, and so I was sort of redefining how I'm making things. So all of a sudden, I had to be really articulate because I'm not in the room. So what am I saying to Russell? How am I coaching him? How am I manipulating movement? You know, became part of the work, you know, and, you know, I love working with ballet dancers. I mean, I'm a modern dance choreographer, but when I come to work with ballet dancers, they bring their own history and they're bringing that ballet history with them. And that's also what I'm collaborating with. So to me, it's like endless possibilities. So we took that further where we made storyboards. That's how I started working. I've never done it before. I totally went old school, took these old dance books I had and went to Kinko's with my mask and my gloves and Xeroxed, if anybody knows what Xerox means anymore. And I handmade these storyboards from, you know, iconic photos of Katherine Dunham and Graham and Helen Tamaris, and you know, and then we put them together and I sent them to Russell and we made something from that. And then I asked Russell, why don't you talk about?
Yeah, and then I sent her Adam Luters, who I've been in conversation with and developing a friendship with over the last couple of years, and who I've been working with in and out of the studio. And she picked a bunch of pictures of Adam dancing and then did the same
images,
thing.
yeah. And I didn't know about him, so I got to learn. And also, you have a connection with him because don't you dance a lot of his roles?
Yeah. Pam picked some roles that I've shared with him and some roles that I've never done, but it was all like then making a dance out of these distinct images of all these people from our different dance histories.
Right. And then my job and our job was to manipulate and create transitions between these things. But also part of the process is that this dance is a marker of time, of what we're in right now. It really was a response to, you know, not feeling alienated. I think that, you know, when we're feeling sadness and alienation, we seek out art that has personal meaning, or we make art that has personal meaning. And so to me, that's what this is. To me, it's not a finished product. To me, it's something to be engaged in. So that's what I'd want the audience, I think that's what I'd want the viewers, that I don't necessarily want them to sit back and be entertained, but I want them to be engaged in what's going on with Russell and what's happening here.
And I think like speaking to what you were saying, Adrian, about Pam's dances being about a place, like the whole thing really transformed then when we came to the Lincoln Center campus, and it shifted how I was moving, because there was suddenly instead of my like 5 by 6.5 rectangle of Marley, there's, a lawn and stairs and
But
things
you
to
do
climb
bring the
on.
Marley.
But yeah.
So that's the thing, is what we've done was we've taken the environment, like you said, and we brought it. So he schleps his Marley around the plaza, because it was a part of how we made the dance.
Right.
And then when I was asked to pick a spot, I couldn't pick one, so I picked 5 different spots.
It's really interesting that it's simultaneously both a response to these environments, but also an active manipulation of them. And I think that so often as dancers, we embody existing choreography. And Russell, you've written about this extensively during quarantine, lockdown, shelter in place. And I think about the last works of both of yours that I experienced were within a 2-week period back at the end of May into June. Pam, you had made a video piece, an instructional video, really, a dance for anybody, outdoors, anywhere. And Russell, 2 weeks later, I read an essay that you'd written, the name of which is escaping me now.
Something about dancing separately.
Dancing separately together.
Which I didn't even know, you didn't even tell me about.
But I think there's something,
Email it.
there's something deeply fascinating about the two of you now illuminating for us that you've been engaged in this long format conversation. And that it hasn't just been in the studio and physical, nor has it just been a verbal conversation.
Right.
But there was this visual collaging aspect to it. I was thinking this, like all these iconic shapes woven together. And this idea that you are really putting a pin in this moment in time, kind of like to announce that you're here and that you're part of all the various lineages that have formed you.
Yeah, because it's important to me, because everything's, dance history is really important to me. I'm always curious and I'm always learning. So even when I get into a room with a ballet dancer, I'm always asking, like, wait, how does this go? Which way? How is this step supposed to, like, what are the technical parts of it and how can I break those? Like, I'm always asking questions because I think everything's on a continuum. So I don't see myself as one isolated person. I feel like it's just important not to be in a vacuum, right. I feel like.
But do you feel in some ways that's cracking open new kinds of creativity for you? That kind of restriction, the kinds of limitation you're working within?
It's hard. Like in the beginning, I actually was gonna just apply for a job as a contact tracer. I always felt like I make live dance. I don't know how to think that way. And it actually, working with Russell helped me sort of, that was the first, Zoom rehearsal I was getting into, and I sort of come out the other side. I feel like, okay, what can I learn from this? What can I do? So I'm learning. I'm back to like square one almost, in a way, which was scary at first, but now I feel like I talk about taking risks all the time in my work, so here's another one.
Put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what I said to myself after, like, being, upset like everyone else and depressed like everyone else about how are we going to survive? And then I was like, I just got to try.
Yeah. And Russell, for you, this, like, what are your practices that return you to beginner's mind in this way?
I think the way that Pam asks her dancers to engage with dance, for me, she's really asking you to not be a ballet dancer. Like, if you do a ballet dancer thing, she's like, don't do it that way. Like, picking, like a lot of, I feel like a fair amount of the direction during the shoot was like, don't pick up your Marley like a dancer, like don't take off your pants like a dancer.
Take off your
and then like one of the first times we worked together, and there was some sort of jump thing, and my arms were like this, and she was like, when you land, like don't let your wrists break, like, and because I was kind of like doing that or something when we landed, and I like didn't really know that I was doing that, like these kind of ballet mannerisms. So I think that working with Pam like asks me to be natural and a person in a way that ballet doesn't often. Like I think that us as ballet dancers, we all look for these opportunities to be our most human selves on stage, but you're also the prince, or you're like presenting your hand in a way that you really that has a long history of
Right.
how you present that hand. So I think Pam asked me to do these movements that I'm really familiar with in a way that is completely foreign to me, which is as though I don't have a lot of experience on the stage being a certain kind of idealized dancer.
Well, I think there's a feeling, and you've written about this, that what we offer on the stage is a certain kind of escapism, and that has immense value. But at this moment in time, I think the exploration of tethering your performative self, your trained self, with your truer expression feels essential. Like anything less, especially on camera, reads as disingenuous.
I also think for a dancer, for me, it's not really about what's better or worse. It's about being able to know what you're doing. So you can choose to do a certain presentational thing, but also know that that's not a go-to. Like, so you're actually choosing to dance that way.
Right.
And you can also, just like I love when there's a specific, like I love asking ballet dancers to have a low leg. Because then they know where their leg is. Right. And if you choose to make it higher, that's a choice. It's not because I know I can do this, right? So though it sort of comes from the same idea that you just have this toolbox and you know where your body is and you know what's happening with it. So you have just choices.
Right. And it demands so much presence of mind, presence of body.
So you can't just like tune out, not that people tune out and like go through rote, things that you've been doing your whole life, which, you just have to you question those things. And I think that's what you've been doing in all your essay writing and.
The one of the first times I danced with Pam, I like couldn't go to I couldn't go to that like ballet place that like ballet dancers sometimes have trouble like articulating what that place is. But it's like sometimes you go out on stage and something else takes over and you don't really feel necessarily like you have agency over your, like you both feel so intensely present and also like you're in the power of something else, and it's extremely exhilarating. But it's also like you get off stage and you're like, I'm not really sure like how that decision-making process happened, like why did that go the way it went? And it's a lot, it's like, years and years of rehearsal and practice leading up to these moments of just kind of letting go. And in Pam's work, you can't do that. And in a way that demands a totally different kind of presence. It's not like, it's like being, I feel like it gives me a level of agency in the experience of dancing that is very different than the kind of like release that I sometimes feel when I'm doing the kind of ballet that I've been working towards doing since I was 6 or 7.
It's interesting, right? The brain is designed for that kind of efficiency. You get good at what you practice, right? And we're constantly optimizing because of that function. But I think what you're describing is a really intentional and constant cognition. It's problem solving.
Exactly, right, and it's, right, so you always have to be present, and it's about that tension. Like I like seeing, like there's a part where, I see Russell's foot like come in really slowly into 5th position. The actual, that is way more interesting than the 5th position to me.
Right.
Which is sort of opposite, I guess, than, going for the big, pretty thing, right? But there's nothing wrong with that either. That's what I'm saying. Like you can have both.
And that both
Why
things,
can't you have both?
Right, and both things are choices.
Correct.
Right.
And I also, in my work, I've been trying to figure out how to work with virtuosity in a way that matters because I love that.
I'm aware of these two present aspects of it. One is that Russell is executing virtuosically this assignment you've given him. But the other is this deeply satisfying witnessing of you trying to execute the thing.
That's exactly it. That's my life right there. You hit the nail on the head.
Right on.
That's important to me, because that's what I mean by engaging in the process. You're with him, and that's what's interesting. I think, and particularly now.
Yeah. And I think particularly effective on film.
Yeah.
Because you
I
can
mean,
really zoom in and see that effort, that intention, that focus
Yeah.
in
The
a way that you
humanness.
can't from the fourth ring.
right. I want to try to make things on film that can't be done live, right? So that's how you make it interesting. So the first time I was on a set, I was like, okay, well, the dancer's going this way. How am I going to get them to re-enter? Well, it doesn't matter. All I have to do is cut.
Yeah.
You know, and then you get to see things super up close. You get to see Russell's foot and his face while he's doing this arabesque and like what's going on and all those things, like you just said, like that is a different way of thinking, you know, that I'm not used to.
Yeah.
So,
And yet
exciting.
I feel I've seen works of yours in the round, like at the
Yeah.
Quadrille.
Yeah.
I've seen works of yours at the Guggenheim that took up the whole theater space, you know?
Right.
And yet we're still trained to have one specific front, right? You
Yeah.
go to a proscenium stage, there are wings, there are entrances and exits,
Right.
as you're saying, and then the audience is there. And so even when you're facing backwards, your presence
Right.
is there. And so I wonder what that does to your practice when it actually becomes three-dimensional.
I think when we started working, one of the questions Russell kept asking me is like, which way do you want me to face? And because the camera, like if you're on your phone or your Zoom, it depends where the person sets up. So it's very hard. Wasn't that one of the, and I think that's a hard, just logistically speaking, because I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it helps dancers remember steps if they know their spacing, right?
Oh yeah.
So then there was no spacing, really. We had the Marley in his garage or in your apartment. So it did take some maneuvering.
When we got, because the last location is the Damrush Park Bandshell, and you know that's this real stage. And there's moments when we were trying to figure out ways to make this choreography fill up a stage. And it's like, oh, we made this in a very small space, oriented towards a camera. How do we now
Open it up.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess for me, the front was always just wherever Pam was. Like I felt like I was just like dancing for Pam the whole
But
time.
I move around
Right.
too. Like
Right.
that's like, I actually do that all the time in my regular rehearsals. Like I'll be looking at something for a long time from the front and I'll walk and I'll look from the side. So instead of making the dancers change their front right away, because then everyone goes, oh, to see if I like it before I start changing everything, which I usually love it because it's usually like a change. I like anything that's different than what I originally thought, right?
And I will say that I think there are some moments where it's like I'd really rather like my fifth position be like front, because if you're seeing it from the side, you're gonna see like how I'm faking it.
Right. Well, the ballet
Which
dancer's
Pam likes.
mind is trained to pick out all your own flaws, and it's
Yeah.
constantly adjusting the perception of line.
Right.
Right. What is this static viewpoint? And I think this is why ballets for 250 years been designed on a stage,
Right.
because we're so vain and self-conscious. I mean, no, it's honestly
And the
about the
way-
perception of that line and how
Right.
we manipulate it.
And then all the way you look at the audience through the épaulement, right? And like all those diagonals of how to see the back and I'm constantly fascinated by that. I don't know, it's a constant source of fascination to me.
I can see that. I mean, even in A Dance for Anybody, there's a sequence, it's arabesque, inverted arabesque.
Yes.
And that feels
Yeah,
like
yeah. Yeah.
The greatest window into this idea. You're like, turn it on its head.
Right.
You know?
And then shimmy. And then, because a lot of what's also interesting to me is how all these steps and things that I've researched and that we've researched together, how they talk to each other,
And I think those kinds of postmodern ideas rarely infiltrate this place. And so it's a welcome disruption.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
You've said that to me before. You love to be able to have such input in a work. I mean, like I've said before, this is really a collaboration between both of us. It's not me telling Russell to get here on count 8. That's not interesting to me. Plus, you've done that, so it's not
Beautifully.
interesting to him.
Beautifully.
Yeah. Oh, beautifully. Yeah, but that's not what we were doing. because we started working on this before before the film idea came to us. It feels really meaningful in a lot of ways and very personal, and that I hope it comes through.
You guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I really
You closed it.
I closed it. I didn't mean to. I don't know, but I feel like we've said.
Yeah, but since it's
everything.
you, I think you've closed one door and opened a million others. And I think that's a beautiful place for us to leave off. To our audience, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to welcoming you back tomorrow night.